first of all, hello, Ken. And oh my goodness, I watched the trailer and I'm a heart-bitten sort of film watcher, theatre watcher, as you probably know. And it actually brought tears to my eyes. So I don't know what you did.
For you.
All right, lad.
How come they're getting all that stuff?
They've lost everything. They've left a war zone.
But the trailer itself, I found, really made me choke. And I think what it was is I've realized you've done a piece of magic, and the magic is about linking this traditional institution of the pub, where particularly in a lot of areas, people, mostly men, used to go to meet and gather and drink and talk together about all sorts of things. And you linked that with the magic that happens when a group of people eat together. And this is the kind of coming together of a sort of the Muslim culture where people, you know, don't drink, and the working class culture centered around the old oak. And I was just so moved by that. Now, please tell me that you were trying to do that.
Well, yes, in a way. I mean, I have to say, you know, the Paul Laverty wrote the piece, and you know, we always share everything, and it feels invidious to be speaking, you know, just as it's never down to one person, as you know, and in our case, it really is a collaboration. And Paul's a wonderful writer, yes, I think that is the central idea of the. You see, I'm behind the time already. My old clock is signaling 11. It's actually 10 past. You know, I'm behind the time already. So yes, it is that, and it's both an image of the pub, the meeting place, the last one remaining in many communities where so much has gone. So it has a concrete reality as well in that sense, in that the public spaces have gone. There was a miners' club that may well have been in that village. There would have been a church hall, places where people gathered. They've mainly gone, and this is hanging on by its fingertips, as in many communities, and it kind of is an illustration of how communities, particularly mines, because they were in the countryside, and steelworks are, again, in Comset nearby, that is closed. But particularly coal miners, because they were such a tight identified community. And when the pit shut, and of course this is a market economy, so nothing can be planned, nobody's interest can be taken care of. It's a cruel system. Nothing was put in its place. New Labour turned its back on them, as well as the Tories. And they have nothing. They have nothing. And into this benighted community, the government chose to place its very few refugees from the Syrian conflict. Why? Because they're out of sight. Houses go for very little, so they're cheap. It's the best place for them because no one will kick up a fuss, unlike the home counties where they say, what are they doing in our backyard? So that's where more Syrian refugees went to that area than anywhere else in the country per head of population. Unbelievable. But how are these two communities going to exist? The people in the village have nothing. They've lost their main source of work. They've lost their identity through the pit. All the benefits of an active community are disappearing. Some hang on to the tradition of solidarity of mining communities. Some are susceptible to the racism and the Little England mentality of the press and media. But the people from Syria have been through a war. I mean, terrible tragedies, terrible torture, imprisonment, destruction of their homes. They have nothing plus a war experience. And how on earth can they get on together? And in a way, that's the question the film tries to answer.
And I mean, I haven't seen the film yet. I'm looking forward to seeing the film. But I mean, the suggestion that came to my mind when I watched the trailer was the answer to that was solidarity, was, you know, how do you rebuild from that? And it struck me when I watched it that that same message could be said at the moment for what's happening to the left and the working class across this country as well.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it is our only strength, is our unity, our joining together, our recognizing that that we are strong. I think that's the great con trick that the ruling class plays on us, is to persuade people how weak they are. They have nothing, and it penetrates to the heart of culture. The working class, they love images of working class people who are victims. Pass the hat round. Collect some money for the poor people on the street, homeless. We need a charity. Set up a charity. Pass the hat round. Throw in a few bob. You know, you go to a supermarket. Yeah, you can get an extra tin of beans, throw it in a basket, and yes, you've done your bit, and that's the answer. And it's all about victims and never about strength. And that's what I think one of the things we wanted to be implicit in the film is just that we have strength, even in those areas where work has faded away. We have strength. I mean, it's the old cliche, isn't it? Nothing is made without the working class makes it. Nothing is moved without the working class moves it. Nothing appears in shops. There's nobody around the counter. There's no services without the working class provide them. So that's our strength, and that's what we have to remind ourselves of. But the only strength only means something if it's activated, and it can only be activated if we act together.
And the image again that I took from the trailer about that was the Durham Miners Gala, that wonderful show of strength and solidarity. And of course, if you've never been, you really should go, because like you say, we get so much of a counter for that makes us continually try and forget, you know, there's power in solidarity and power in the unions.
Yes, well, I think you're right. I hope the trailer hasn't given too much of the story away. There are twists that are not in the trailer, I promise you.
I knew that there was, and I was trying to spy for where that would be. And I think the pivotal character in there is going to be the guy who I think is the publican. I think he's going to pay, but I'm not going to try and, like I said, I haven't seen it, so I really don't know. Yeah,
but you're right, and the Durham Gala, the Miners Gala, is amazing, and of course it's why it's never reported.
Yeah,
I mean the hunt. I'm not very good at assessing figures. I mean, people say 100,000, 150,000. I know certainly when Jeremy was leading the Labour Party, there were 200,000 there. Never reported.
Yeah,
Jeremy went on the platform this time. A huge round of applause and the Jeremy Corbyn song, never reported.
Yeah,
he's seen as a sort of lost individual now on the fringes of politics. Go there, no, he's centre stage. And the leaders of the Durham miners positively affirmed their loyalty and their support for Jeremy. Publicly said it. Round huge applause, never reported. Which will get us on to the second thing I know we want to talk about. But I think that strength is, and we've got to find ways of capturing that organizationally, which is why some of us are thinking at the moment that we can't unite about whether there's a new party or not, because new parties are springing up. But we can unite on the principles that bring us together. And out of that, one hopes an organisational unity will arise.
And that's the way grassroots organisation has always occurred, in that you agree on the bits that you can agree on and you fight together in solidarity for those aims. But what I want to ask you now, Ken, it's kind of linked to the new film in a way, which is the response in Europe and overseas to you and your work. Is it at all affected by the madness of this debate that's happening in the Labour Party about who has dared to share a platform with you?
No, but people don't know about that really, which in some ways is a great relief. The sad thing is they don't know about Jeremy Corbyn and the whole movement for the left to, or for the progressive element to represent Labour, for Labour Party to represent the Labour movement, which doesn't seem too much to ask, but of course it never works that way. And so it's very important to tell them about that and say, look, there is a sleeping giant here.
Yeah.
We kicked the door open, and there was a possibility that the Labour Party could have just begun a program, a political program that would have restored power, not restored, but would have taken some power for the working class to move, and that would have led to more demands, and it could have been the beginning of a ladder to substantially change society for the better. And they didn't know. Very few people know about that.
And there's reasons why people don't know about it, isn't it? It's called censorship. And whether you actually censor a film or a news report by putting an X on it, or whether you censor it by the fact that there are, shall we say, editorial choices which are made, which don't happen to mention what's going on in that way. The same thing is true. It's still censorship, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, it's the manipulation of consciousness, I suppose, to put it in a pompous way. That's how the political debate is framed. And again, it's tied to the interests of the ruling class always. It's tied to the maintenance of the property relations. It's tied to the interests of the powerful, retaining those interests and them not being challenged, that not being on the agenda, that it's almost like a fact of nature. It is the natural structure of society. And that if you challenge that, then that's subversion. That's outside the democratic norms. And the hypocrisy of that is very interesting, I think. Because on the one hand, you've got the press, the right-wing press, which is generally acknowledged to be right-wing. It's owned by oligarchs and the rest, and absentee, very wealthy men and organisations, Murdoch and Co, and the people who own the Telegraph, and the rest of them, the people who own the Express. So you know who they are. They are the right-wing. And pretty well the far right, actually. Then there is the liberal press led by The Guardian, and that is seen or is claimed to be on the left. And then there is the arbiter of what is the point of balance, and that's the BBC, and ITV follows. And that's the interesting case, because the BBC proclaims itself as the gold standard of objectivity. It's written into its charter. And then when the BBC is under attack from the free marketeers who want to destroy it, the liberal elites, the liberal establishment, I won't use elite, liberal establishment comes forward, particularly in The Guardian readers and the rest of them, and say, protect the independence of the BBC. That is the lie. Yes. The BBC is an organ of the state. It represents the interests of the ruling class. It is never objective. And it has the qualities of the British ruling class at its best, which is that it's urbane, it's very civilized, it has a great sense of humor, it's self-deprecating, be a great companion at a posh dinner, you'd be entertained, fond of good stories, very pleasing company. But when attacked, my God, they get a knife in.
Yeah.
And
And
you
I think
see,
that,
sorry.
sorry, that came out recently, because I don't know if you know about this, but there was a recent interview with Rachel Reeves, who actually said, and I have to think about exactly how she said this, and this is one of those things where you have to be really careful, but it was something around the fact that Jamie Driscoll, who's being now blocked from becoming a Labour mayor, because, you know, I mean, to say that he shared a platform is just nonsense, because what he actually did was that at an event which was about filmmaking, he dared to interview Ken Loach about his filmmaking without mentioning, according to the BBC, the controversy on anti-Semitism. And Rachel Reeves then said that Driscoll had shared a platform with people who had been expelled for anti-Semitism. Now, do you want to unpick that in any way, or do you want me to start unpicking it?
Well, I mean, it's part of the smear that goes on. I mean, I was glad to leave the Labour Party, to be honest. I mean, I was expelled from the Labour Party, and wear it as a badge of honour. I have to say, it was like ending an abusive relationship, and I'm sure you found the same.
Yes.
You can suddenly breathe fresh air again. But no, I mean, I was expelled for supporting an organisation that, when I supported it, it was perfectly illegal. I would carry on supporting it anyway, because it's a good organisation. It's Labour against the witch hunt. There is a witch hunt, and people are smeared. But I wasn't expelled for anti-Semitism. I was expelled for supporting an organisation that asked for due process in the disciplinary procedure, because the disciplinary procedure in the Labour Party is I see as a kangaroo court, and are a joke in terms of a kind of legal rectitude. No surprise that Starmer supports them, since his interest in the niceties of the law don't seem to apply whether it's the Labour Party or Palestine. But so what they're clever at is, without alleging that you're anti-Semitic, getting your name in the same headline.
That's
so
right.
that my name and anti-Semitism is linked, even though I've never been accused of anti-Semitism. I'm accused of having a bad record of it. Now, what does that mean? It means that I've defended the rights, as you have, I know, far more vociferously than I have, and with to greater effect, I'm sure. I've defended the rights of the Palestinian people under international law and generally recognized human rights to live in peace and security. Then you are under attack. If you claim that repeatedly, then you are under attack. If you attack the political project of Zionism, which I understand it is the project of establishing a Jewish state in historic Palestine, if you challenge that, then again that's a sign of anti-Semitism. And one of the senior figures of the pro-Israeli organizations here, I forget his name, wrote a piece in the Evening Standard which said anti-Zionism is the new anti-Semitism. So of course, if you then make that challenge, then you're accused. And Rachel Reeves didn't know the facts, couldn't substantiate any of the things she said when challenged by the journalist Simon Happenstone, and just kept repeating the same things because she didn't know the facts. They speak of a level of ignorance that is contemptible, and they're never called out.
They're never called out, and I actually don't think it's just ignorance. There are downright lies which are not challenged, including by the BBC, and then are just left to stand. And when people ask you, and they certainly ask me, and they ask me about you, Ken, why don't you take them to court? Well, as we all know, that is a game which embroils you in a huge amount of energy. and money, which most of us mere mortals don't have, so that whether you win notionally or lose, you are going to lose. Libel, accusing somebody of libel is a rich man's game, and it's not for the likes of people like us, I think. But given what's going on at the moment, how should we respond as people on the left to this issue of no platforming, banning and censorship? What way do we have to deal with this?
I think it's a very good question. I think Ilan Pappé, the great Israeli historian and professor at Exeter University, I believe, said, let's talk about Palestine, because that's at the heart of it. And the case against what Israel is doing is so clear that that is our strength. And just to repeat the case, expose the links between the pro-Israeli groups in here and the anti-Semitism campaign that was launched against Jeremy Corbyn and the Left and Labour Party and socialists like us. Expose that link, demand Palestinian rights, expose what Israel is doing. And I think we're on very solid ground.
Yeah. And actually, I have to say that given recent events that we're seeing panning out in Israel in terms of this new law that they are putting through, Netanyahu, and the changing attitudes of Jews, certainly in America, towards settlements as well as towards Zionism, I think we are actually winning. We're beginning to get that traction. And the one of the biggest tools for us to do that is social media. And those of us who can need to speak out and to keep speaking out and to keep educating and to be not put off by the threats, etc., which come our way.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I'm the wrong generation for social media, sadly. I think Roger Waters, I know you were speaking to recently, I was immensely brave. I mean, he just fires from the hip, and he's just straight down the line and says it how he sees it. Well done to Roger. But I think we all have different ways of expressing ourselves and making the points, and why absolutely that's right. But I think I agree with you. It is the appalling oppression against the Palestinians, and Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the Israeli Human Rights Organization, all have categorized Israel as an apartheid state. That's their words. They're imposing a system of apartheid on the Palestinians. Isn't it remarkable that the BBC failed to use that word? When those reports came out, silence, almost silence.
Yeah.
Almost silence. And it's very interesting. I mean, this is only a little aside. When I was expelled from the Labour Party, much to my surprise, on the Radio 5 News, 9 o'clock, I think, and 10 o'clock on that day, I was on the headlines, film director expelled from the Labour Party. And I thought, there's going to be a story. I'll get asked to do a turn at 1 o'clock news. An hour later, it had gone from the Radio 5 News. It wasn't on. I didn't get a call from the news, the 1 o'clock news. The story was killed. Yeah. Now, I don't know why this was. Why did they think it was a story for a couple of hours and then it miraculously just disappeared? And I noticed it because my name was involved. I mean, of little account, probably not a news story anyway. But you notice how, when the stories are much bigger, you notice how stories come and go depending on who is writing the news. And the key thing we always forget, somebody writes the news. the news is not delivered from on high. Somebody writes it. Somebody puts one story juxtaposed to another. And somebody decides that it is not a news story that Amnesty International calls Israel an apartheid state. It's not news.
I know.
But remarkably, it is news. It's been the top story for the last couple of days, the intricacies of Israeli politics. Now, suppose that were Lebanon. Would we have the same interest in the state next door? Suppose it were Egypt. Would we have that dominate the top story of the news every day? Of course we wouldn't.
Well, I think what they wanted to get over, because I started counting how often they used, or somebody used, the term democracy to describe the Israeli regime. I got to 20, right? And I only listened to this report for a couple of hours and then I turned it off, because the message is actually not about what's happening in Israel. The message that they're trying to send to us is that here you have Israeli democracy under threat. And that's the message. Whereas, of course, those of us who are in any way aware understand that Israel is not a democracy. It's an apartheid, and I would say terrorist state as well. But that was the message that they want. So I think what we always have to do is to actually look for what the message is that they want to send us, because that will tell you the reason that they're actually putting out this kind of stuff.
Exactly. It's the subtext for the questions. You're dead right. It's who they interview, what the question is they ask, and what language they use, because that implies the given of the BBC. And it's interesting, if you were to define their politics, I think Kenneth Clarke is the absolute epitome of BBC politics. He's the acceptable face of the Tory party. No time for Boris Johnson, trust. They're a threat to their society because they're either out of control or they're too extreme. No, their model is Kenneth Clarke, and maybe Gordon Brown for a time until he became absurd. So there's a kind of narrow band down the centre that they will not challenge, and their failure, the soft ride that Starmer is having, their failure to challenge Starmer on any of the key points. They will occasionally say, "Oh, you've gone back on your word, on your pledges," or whatever they were, but there's no mention of the left. And the great story of the Labour Party is it's gone. What is it? Half the size now, 2/3 the size it was under Jeremy. 200,000 or so people left the Labour Party. It's not a story. Imagine that amount had left under Jeremy Corbyn. There would be no Labour Party at all, because that's all it was when he came in. And their manipulation of the news is, and once the BBC says it, then that's it. That's the truth, according to them. So that is why I think they are more dangerous than any other news organisation.
Well, thank you, Ken. I'm so looking forward to watching the film. I really am. And I hope everybody else will go and watch it and talk about the issues of race and poverty, of disparities, of how we triumph of solidarity. And I hope we all get to actually use that film as a talking point for that. Thanks, Ken.
Well, thank you. And look, I hope it lives up to expectations. I mean, it's only a film, and we scrambled it together, and so I want to lower expectations here.
Okay, let's have very low expectations for Loach's film.
I'd be really pleased if you manage to go and see it. That'd be really helpful.
I'll manage, don't worry. Thanks very much, Ken.
Good to talk to you, Jackie.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.